Okay, today I am re-reviewing my ESP E-II Arrow. I did a review on this guitar about a year ago, and I'd like to update you guys with how this guitar has held up. I am the first owner of this guitar, so this guitar has been with me the whole time. Before we start, I have to say I'm not sponsored by any of the brands shown in this video. I'm not some amazing guitar virtuoso either. I make YouTube videos, I do record music, some cover songs, some originals, and put them in videos and on streaming services too. So let's jump right in. How has this guitar held up? I'd say the guitar plays decently well. I'm not as in love with it as previous years, and I will talk about playability more in a bit. But man, if you like flying V guitars and offset Vs, this thing looks pretty cool, at least in my opinion. Maybe this part right here, this bump on the upper horn, the upper wing. That might be polarizing. Some people might not like it. There you go. You could see it really nicely against the background. Yeah. Some people might not like it. I like it. It's fine. You could tell it's an older Arrow too because the strap button is down here instead of over here. And the output jack is over here, by the way, so it doesn't get in the way of anything. So yeah, I've blocked the bridge. I usually block my double locking tremolo bridges, but with this one in particular, there is a kind of popping sound at the nut if you use the Floyd the whammy a lot, or if you do a big dive bomb. And it doesn't affect tuning stability. It hasn't affected anything except how you feel, or how I feel when I play it, because it is a little unsettling, but with the nut locked down and with the bridge blocked, it never makes that sound. So, okay, whatever. If you're a big whammy bar user though, that would be a pretty big deal breaker, because who knows what that's doing over time. Thankfully, I'm not, but it could be an issue with just this one particular guitar in general. I haven't owned multiple Arrows over time, so I can't say for sure. And then the pickups, I still have the Fishman Fluence Moderns I put in them. They're pretty good. We all know what they sound like. There's about 1 million demos online. I'll do a full mix demo later too. And I will talk about the sound more later too, but right now let's jump to talking about the playability. So, I'm typically an Ibanez fan. As you can see behind me, I have some Solars, a few Abassis. This guitar, with its 12-inch fretboard radius, it's pretty round for me anyway. So I do prefer flatter radii, but this is surprisingly comfortable. The neck isn't particularly thick. It isn't the thinnest, even though they do bill it as a thin U. It's not super thin, it's not Ibanez thin, but it isn't by any means thick. Just by feel, it might be thinner than the Solars I have by just a little bit, but it is still pretty decent for filling the hand and doing some of the bends like that if that's what you like to do. So while the rounder radius is fairly comfortable for me, it is still rounder, so I am used to the flatter radii. So when I am playing, I do find myself missing the high E, or I'm in drop C, so the high D technically, but I do find myself missing the high E string sometimes with my picking hand, even with my playing hand, until I get used to it, which takes a few minutes. That's if I'm switching from one of my Ibanez or other guitars. And so that can be annoying if I'm switching between guitars for a video, or for other playing purposes. Maybe you're thinking of getting this guitar to play for a certain song in your set, or certain part of your live stream or whatever you do, and you're thinking of switching between this and a different guitar, and you will have to get used to the different radius if there is a difference between your other guitar. Maybe this will be your first electric guitar. And so then something else to note too for the playability, obviously there's no lower horn right here to get in your way, so you can very easily get to the top frets. No problem. Of course, the strap button is right there, so you would have to hold it like this, or like this, or like this. Yeah, you get the idea. Something that also affects the playability is the gloss neck. It's painted, it's gloss, so it's not a natural wood, it's not satin, so your finger can get stuck on it. It does get a bit sticky. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this. It's not the worst thing in the world. You can still play the guitar, but it isn't ever gonna feel quite as fast, at least not to me, as like a natural finish neck. I am thinking of sanding it down someday to be at the very least satin. This just isn't my primary guitar, so I haven't done it yet. And speaking of sticky, I don't know what it is, but this Ebony fretboard does feel a little bit sticky. It doesn't quite feel like any of the other Ebony fretboards I have on my other guitars, and I'm not 100% sure why that is. The drag on it isn't horrible by any means, but it does, I can feel it. So because of that, and because the shape of the guitar is, while it's cool, it is inconvenient, I find myself passing up this guitar and picking up other guitars that are either easier to sit with or have a different feeling ebony fretboard. Of course, playing standing up the shape is just fine. Don't hit anything with the wings. But playing seated, obviously you have to sit with it classical style. You can't sit with it standard style unless you have it way up on a strap right here. And so yes, you can sit with it classical style, but you can only sit with it. So if you're tired of turning this way, well, your only other option really is to stand. If you want to just grab a guitar because you have an idea real quick and you just want to sit down and play it, you really can't. And that can be inconvenient if, say, for example, you want to sit down at a computer and tab out what you're doing as you're doing it. Well, then having the guitar in front of you, it might be a little annoying. It's not impossible. It's not the end of the world. People do it. It's just something to consider, because if you're going to buy this guitar and you're going to use it, even if it's a little annoying, because you're going to use it hundreds or thousands of times, it'll add up. So I'm trying to give you some useful information here for the sake of the discussion. Let's see, the frets, they're the nickel silver frets, but they feel very high quality. Doesn't really feel like there's too much drag or anything of the sort. I am wearing them down just a little bit, but because I distribute playing wear across guitars, and because these frets feel pretty high quality, they feel pretty durable, nothing's really divoting yet. I do have to say though, of course, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, I don't usually practice on this guitar that much. It's usually more when I really want to get the tone of this, or the sustain, because it has the neck through, I think it has, or I want to use it for a video. Those are the times I use this guitar. But for just practicing for a few hours or so, I don't really pick this up. And then finally, playability. I mentioned there's the strap button here. There's the strap button here. I can see why they moved it. The buttons do feel a bit close together. So especially if you're a bigger person, it will kind of feel like it's wrapping around you instead of having the guitar just hang on you. All right, now let's talk about how this guitar sounds. I did change the pickups from the 81s it came with to the Fishman Fluence Moderns. It had an 81 in the bridge, which we all know and love, but it also had an 81 in the neck, which I was not really a fan of at all. I wasn't a fan of how it sounded. So I do like how the 81 in the bridge sounds, but I did switch it out for the Fishman Fluence Modern, and it's good. This is a good set of pickups. Again, you've heard a million demos of these online. They have decent dynamics. You could roll off the volume. It sounds good. Of course, full volume sounds amazing. Also affecting the sound, or affecting, another part of the sound is how much sustain you get from this. You've got the neck through and you've got the trem block, as in the block screwed into the bridge. You do get some pretty good sustain. It sounds pretty good and it can hold notes. That with the active pickups too, it really helps. So if you need to hold long notes for multiple measures, you can do it. All right, so let me outline some pros and cons of this guitar. So the pros are the guitar does feel pretty solid. Aside from that weird nut popping phenomenon, it does feel more solid than a bunch of my other guitars. More than half of them, I'd say. The active pickups could be a pro or a con. I guess you could rewire it to put in passives if you like. The neck profile is a pretty good pro. It is pretty comfy. The fret axis is a huge pro. The sustain, of course. Another pro that I like is the reverse headstock, because then when you're tuning it, your hand can be in a more natural position like this, versus if you're trying to do the standard ones, and I'll hold the guitar like this, you're trying to do the standard ones, you do have to do this twisting motion, which isn't the end of the world. It's just a super minor detail, and it looks pretty metal. And then the bevels on this, it's got some nice comfortable bevels on the top and also on the back, you can see. So the bevels aren't as deep as my Solar V, but it has back bevels and the Solar V doesn't. So it won't be digging into your leg as you're sitting down with it. And that is pretty nice. But let's talk about the cons now. This is obviously a Flying V guitar, and while Flying Vs look very cool, they are also pretty inconvenient. I talked about it earlier, but you can't just sit down and play it. Like, that's not how you sit with a Flying V. You have to sit like this, so you're always stuck in that classical position, or you have to play standing up. And of course the points too, it's very easy to walk into something with them. Now I haven't done it yet, knock on wood, but you're always gonna kind of feel the shape, like, okay, this isn't a super strat, it's not compact like anything, it is this bigger shaped guitar, and because of that its case is pretty big too. So I do a lot of sitting down and recording, and it is fine to sit with it classical style for a while, but when I'm like cramping up or I've been sitting in that position for a while. I do want to switch around, and you just can't with this. You'd have to stand up. And so I do find that to be a pretty big con. Again, it's not impossible. People do it all the time. It's just something to consider if that's something you do. And then finally, I've said before that this guitar takes the least amount of warm-up for me to get to playing, but unfortunately that's no longer true. I don't know what exactly it is. I have been practicing my playing form and technique a little bit, and it's improved, and I am more used to playing on my Ibanez guitars now, like really more thumb behind the neck stuff. So coming back to this guitar, it takes me just as long to warm up on this guitar as other guitars. And maybe it's just me getting 1 year older. Maybe I'm just a little more inflamed. Maybe I'm becoming more of an old man. Not saying that this guitar isn't playable. It's just I hate to phrase it like this, but the magic is gone a little bit from me. It's a good guitar, don't get me wrong, but I gotta warm up on it just as much as other guitars. So couple that with the body shape, which is really cool, and I do like to play it every now and then. It's no longer one of my top picks. So let's go to some concluding thoughts now. I mentioned this is no longer one of my top picks, and that's just a combination of the gloss neck, the slightly sticky fretboard, and I do like clean and condition my fretboards about every 6 months or so. But those things coupled with the inconvenient shape and that popping sound issue, which hasn't affected anything yet, but it is slightly a little unsettling. So all those things together make me just not pick up this guitar as much as I used to. I do have a more stable V in my Solar V 1.7, but that is a 7-string. I do like playing 7 strings, and I do use them in a lot of my songs, but I don't use them in every song. Sometimes I just need a 6-string. So overall, I'd say this looks cool, it sounds good, it's plenty playable, but the little things have added up to make me not want to pick up this guitar as much anymore. So there you have it. That's my re-review of the ESP E-II Arrow with the Fishman Fluence Moderns. Do you have any other questions, comments, thoughts? Leave them down in the comment section below. This is YouTube, so I have to say the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video, print out every frame and mail it. And as always, peace.